Hello everyone, Cal Sahota here, VP of Possibilities with the HeroX team. Today we are pleased and excited to be speaking with Jordan Goldfarb, who is the Director of Whitespace at Innovations at Lululemon. We also have with us today HeroX's very own CEO and co-founder, Christian Cottacini. How are you both doing today?
Yeah, doing great. Sorry, we're spoke at the same time there, but yeah, it's okay. nice,
so aligned.
Nice to be here, and thank you. Thanks for having me.
That's awesome. So, listen, I get the pleasure of speaking with brands and organizations literally all over the globe, and a common issue I see is the ability to be able to bring innovation into an organization. So today we'll be chatting with both Jordan and Christian about how the power of core values and overall company culture can be an accelerant for innovation. So excited to hear some of your insights. So thanks again, Jordan, for joining us today.
Cool.
So let's kick off with some introductions. So I can get us started. My name is Cal Sahota, as I mentioned, and my role with the team is the VP of Possibilities, which means that I get the absolute pleasure of connecting with organizations all over the globe, supporting them in bringing crowdsourcing into their innovation strategy. My background is 25 years of very traditional business, and I've had the pleasure of being in this space now for over 4.5 years. Christian, you want to jump in and go next?
Sure, yeah. My name is Christian Cottacini. I'm the co-founder and CEO of HeroX. Been a long-time entrepreneur and had the chance to meet Peter Diamandis, the founder of XPRIZE, and get involved in XPRIZE. And we started talking and collaborating about how we could create a platform that really lets anybody leverage the power of the crowd. And that led to us joining forces and creating HeroX, and really proud with the progress we've made and the work that we're doing now.
Awesome. That's great. Jordan, over to you. Tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So Jordan Goldfarb, and Cal, as you mentioned, I lead a group called Explorations, which sits within Lululemon's R&D team, which the brand name for that is Whitespace. My career has gone from management consulting into the sort of athletic apparel and footwear world. I was with Nike for a while before joining Lululemon about 3 years ago now. Most of my time has been spent in different forms of innovation roles. And I've had the opportunity to work even before coming to sort of the industry I've been in for some time, across industries. And what I've tried to do with the teams that I lead and the projects we work on is look for patterns that work, agnostic of the type of product we're making or the industry or sector in which we're doing that. And excited at the opportunity Lululemon gives me and the team to do that within our platform.
That's amazing. That's great. And it's perfect segue, because actually one of the first questions I was going to ask you is, what was your journey and kind of what brought you to Lululemon?
Yeah.
But you know what, the other part of that, I was going to ask, and we'll just dive right into the questions now, is what makes you so passionate about innovation?
It's a really good question. There's a couple things. One is I'm at this point in my life and career where doing things that I can clearly tie meaning to is really important to me. Innovation to me is inherently means that there's, I'll use a bit of a buzz term, but there's a wicked problem or opportunity that needs solving. And it means that there has to be an innate curiosity to love the problem first before you get to solutioning, which to me brings meaning to the work. And so why I'm so passionate about innovation is because, one, it forces myself to think different, which I just think is healthy. And two, it probably means that what we're trying to do is help people or the environment or some facet of being human, which, if that doesn't motivate you, then I'm not sure what would.
That's such a great answer. And what's even more great about it is when we have conversations like this with individuals, and you see the alignment with the way we think at our organization, and it really comes through in your answer there. So that's great. So Jordan, what do you love most about your corporate culture. So, and that's one part of it. And the other part of it, which is sometimes even more important, is what are some of the systems and the processes that you have in place as an organization to really support that culture and make sure it stays intact and actually flourishes?
Sure. I'll answer the first part. We have, like many organizations, a set of core values, and that since I've been here, and even through Lululemon's 20-year existence, there's been this concerted effort to constantly revisit and update values or elements that might need a refresher, and at the same time living true to ones that feel evergreen. And since I can remember, in the stories I've heard about Lululemon, is that the values of courage and entrepreneurship, and this sense of personal responsibility still ring through. And that, what I love most about the culture and how it supports innovation is that for a company that is by a lot of measures large nowadays, smaller than some, bigger than many, there is still this feeling that as an individual or as a team, you have the opportunity to make a big dent, because taking calculated risks and preparing for a future state that would mean potentially taking the company in a different direction is encouraged. I think that Lululemon as a culture recognizes that people, and therefore companies, are always in a state of flux, and that a dynamic world requires dynamic solutions, and so the culture tries to foster that. I would say and then to answer the processes part of the question, I would say, we are getting better, and actually, I think the nice answer is that the company is constantly looking at doing a better job of managing innovation, whether that's within, the R&D function of Whitespace, or the fact that, every function in the business is innovating in their own way. And I think we constantly scrutinize how we resource innovation, how the skew of a portfolio based on the mission and objectives we're trying to do. And there is a good culture of, there's a good metrics driven culture that indicates and drives decision making. And for me, that makes it pretty easy to set a target and then know where you stand at the end of the year.
That's great. I love your answer on the metrics part of it, and we'll dig into that just in a little bit. But Christian, this one's for you. As we all know, a foundation to any corporate culture really starts with the core values that are embedded within the team. So when someone asks you to talk about our HeroX core values, how do you describe them?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Before I go there, let me just do another shout out for the power of culture and the importance of culture. Lululemon. So I live in Vancouver. Lululemon's headquarters in Vancouver. I've listened to Chip talk at many talks, and met him a few times, and been really impressed with how that organization's evolved and what it's become. And it's just a great example of the power of culture to transform things and how important it is. Tony Hsieh, I think, has a quote I really love. It's on my computer somewhere, that a brand is a lagging indicator of culture. And that's something that I've learned through the 4 companies I've started. That culture is really, really critical. So I've kind of become a bit of a culture wonk, right? And learned as an entrepreneur how to get your hands on the levers and dials of culture, because it's massively misunderstood. And I think a good way to think about it is that culture is like the shadow your company leaves when they're working. And just like a shadow, you can't change the shadow. You've got to look at what's casting the shadow. And that's what makes culture so difficult to change. And a lot of business people don't understand how to do that. So core values is one of the things that you can do that sets, normalizes the behaviors that you want in the company. So we've we started day one. In fact, the first meeting we ever had about HeroX, before we even had the name HeroX, was to grab some Post-it notes and talk about values and what we wanted to stand for as a company. And then we've iterated from there. So we have 5 core values that really resonate with everybody in the team, and we really reward and celebrate living them day in and day out. And I'd be happy to go through those, but those are my thoughts anyways about what you've asked so far.
That's awesome. Thanks for that, Christian. So, listen, so I'm going to ask your thoughts on that, Jordan. So within Lululemon, is there also core values that you have that you really focus your culture around? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I alluded to a few of them in my response earlier, but absolutely there is, and it echoes a lot what Christian said with HeroX around. That's probably the bedrock of the culture, and I imagine was so since day one when Chip founded the company, and long before I was with Lululemon. I think ones that come to mind as it relates to certainly an R&D or innovation context. Again, our entrepreneurship, courage, personal responsibility. I think but then also this idea that it really is about a sense of we. So although personal responsibility is crucial, I would say even more so, the Lululemon and the teams within it are going to sink or swim together, so to speak. And that you really do feel that sentiment around the holidays. And I think it goes a long way to the success that the company's been experiencing, and I believe will continue to experience. I think that we do a nice job, especially in white space, to what we say, like we put ultimately our guest, our term for customer, and the work as the utmost importance, meaning that we say this term that projects own people don't own projects. It's not about sort of an individual contribution to this. It's ultimately the success of the outcome and our ability to improve the lives of our guests and their communities indicates the level of success we have. So it starts at those personal, those core values, and really kind of permeates all the way out to how we deliver products.
That's great. And we touched on this already a little bit, and you mentioned it, metrics. So, with any team, with any organization, one of the key abilities to be able to measure whether we're doing well or could be doing better is the measure of metrics. So when you look at innovation and the different projects that your team is up to, what kind of metrics do you wrap around it other than the traditional ones, which would be obviously the ROI? And then secondly, how did you come about discovering that those are the right metrics that really work for you?
That's it. Okay. I'll answer it in a couple ways. I would say, to make sure, apart from the traditional ones, which of course are important, we first want to try, and I'll use sort of a digital product term. We try to make sure that we are avoiding vanity metrics early on, which don't get us to really understanding causality. So I will say, like, correlative metrics in innovation and in our group, they can be nice, but they really don't tell us much as if what we did caused the outcome that we're seeing. I'll say, early on in projects, and the other one I'll offer up that we almost look at not at all is time. Often innovation portfolios and velocity is measured on time to delivery. And although we certainly have an impetus and a drive to deliver frequently as sort of deems appropriate, we instead look at things in terms of uncertainty, both from a technical and market standpoint, and therefore that leads us to looking at metrics around complexity. So there's a framework that we use often called a technical epiphany framework. I won't go deep into what that is here, but our goal as an R&D group is, as much as we can, to work on projects that deliver a technical epiphany, which, if you imagine a 2x2, would be in that top right quadrant. And so when people say, like, how do you measure the velocity of your portfolio or things, I often first say, well, we don't look at time and say like, you know, we're the group that delivers 3 to 5 years out, because as you know, upping resource can increase the pace at which you can get through complexity. So I would say that in the non-traditional we look at is if we're going to deliver a technical epiphany, we try to do that as often as possible to truly, you know, disrupt a current category or reinvent a new business opportunity potentially.
Mm-hmm.
It's how effectively have we reduced uncertainty to then be able to have a high likelihood of designing the right thing, which is owning the problem space,
Mm-hmm.
and then moving into designing the thing right, which is then looking at the typical metrics that a good solution would have in any company or product. So it's a bit of a roundabout way of answering it, but that's the sort of how we look at metrics.
And when you wrap culture around the metrics, do you find that the culture supports the metrics, or do you find that there can be a bit of a push and pull there?
I think sometimes there can, but I would say, you know, what's interesting is we thought from a culture standpoint that velocity or turnover of like people seeing their work get out the door, so to speak, or hit the
Right.
shelf would be
Sure.
a really important indicator as to employee engagement or even things like retention. And what we found is actually, certainly in our group, that, you know, people or the kind of people we attract are okay sort of, you know, being in the muck for as long as it takes. But again, it comes back to creating a culture where people see meaning in the problems we're trying to solve. And as long as that continues to be true in our R&D group, then the metrics that they aspire to see is really about progress. And then when we do deliver, having sort of that disproportionate amount of impact, knowing that we did deliver something disruptive.
Wow, that's great. Christian, should we
Yeah.
pick your brain a little bit? So in conversations with brands, and you certainly don't have to mention names, are you seeing there to be a correlation with culture and innovation? And is there an example that maybe comes to mind where it either really worked well or where you've seen it stall?
Yeah. So, I mean, well, I would say that, you know, like I said, I think culture is everything in an organization. You know, it really is it's like the, you know, the space that you're doing all your work in, and kind of like a gravity field, right? It's going to pull you in the direction, even if you fight it in one meeting. You know, over time, it's going to pull you. It's going to win, right? So, you know, innovation is a funny word, right? It's you know, like people know it when they see it, but it's hard to describe it, and most people don't have an understanding of the underlying, you know, mechanics and dynamics of innovation. But really, most organizations, they become, as they grow, they become very risk averse, and they become very committed to what works and what's proven, both consciously and unconsciously. And innovation, you know, challenges all of that. And it's really challenging for any organization, even a small organization, to really adopt and embrace innovation successfully. So one of the ways to look at it is, you know, your organization's like rate of innovation and innovation readiness is a metric about your culture that you should be looking at. And you know, there's a lot of relationship between you know, people's the risk that they're willing to take, the psychological safety in the organization, the leadership's emphasis on innovation, and then the culture of the company. That all feeds into you know, into how that organization is going to succeed.
Got it. So Jordan, I'm going to let you chime in a little bit on that as well, and perhaps not necessarily in Lululemon, but obviously you've been a part of other organizations as well. So have you found there to be a correlation between culture and innovation? And can you think of specific times where you've actually either seen it really flourish or get blocked?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the classic example, but I find still holds true, is that there is a strong relationship between the how risk is incentivized at a culture,
Mhm.
and then the either level of inventiveness of the innovation, and therefore the failure rate. You know, it's like
Mm.
people, and Christian said it well, and that innovation has kind of become a funny, somewhat overused word that you know when you see it, but it
Oh
seems like
yeah.
battered around. I would say like fail fast or these sort of buzzy innovation words are the same way, and that it's a very nice thing to say, you know, in a speech or a tabloid, and it's very actually hard to do well. Like it's hard for companies, you know, when it comes to employee performance ratings at year end, or even just generally how resources or recognition is allocated, to do that based on those who maybe fail more often than not. And again, it's like, so I think some of it, Cal, is dictated by the industry or sector in terms of just what their core purpose or mission is.
True.
But you know, where I've been part of teams that do it well, it truly is celebrated in a way that, and what you find is that that doesn't at all lead to complacency or people having this safety net that, well, doesn't matter, I don't have to try that hard because if I fail, I'm still going to be rewarded. In fact, the opposite seems to occur. You know, in a disproportionate amount of time, velocity of innovation increases and the impact that those innovations have go up as well.
Mm.
So that's what I've generally seen in the teams that I've been part of. When those aren't congruent, often innovation is very slow, and is why big, you know, often like the big companies who try to change that about their culture recognize that they're, you know, the startups start eating their lunch because
Hmm.
they can just do that so much faster.
So if you were to, just to riff on that a little bit more, if you were to have a conversation with somebody that's at a C-suite level or at a senior level in some of these really large organizations, what advice would you give them to really, open the floodgates of innovation and really get around what you just described there as an area that they could potentially be stuck?
Yeah, I would say, well, I'll give a scenario, because sometimes it's like, again, it depends where the company is in its life cycle. Sometimes it depends also just the state of the economy. Like we are, you know, I often say like, you know, functional silos in an organization is sort of a symptom of fat times. You know, like when
Mm.
times are good, often what we see is that like there are walls in terms of departments and silos wanting to own things. You know, like there seems to be encampments within an organization, especially big ones. And you find if you look back, you find almost undoubtedly every time that when there's a shock to the system, either growth slows down or
Mm.
a leadership in a company says, you know, we have to change this culture. One of the first things they do to succeed is like find the entrepreneurs in the organization and actually give them space to be entrepreneurs. And then two, actively force the silos to disappear. So whether that be, you know, you organize and say, you know, as an organization, these are our 10 most important projects, and the groups working on them are pulled from all the functions. And again, you make the work and the viability and success of the project the outcome. And in big companies, sometimes what gets lost, I find, is that the sort of viability of the function itself or that encampment becomes the focus. And when that happens, innovation slows down.
I love that strategy. And from my listening, my most favorite part of your share was finding potentially the top 10 most entrepreneurs, within the organization. What a brilliant way to really tap into the talent that already exists. That's
Yeah.
really, really great answer. So Jordan, let's talk a little bit more about your role at Lululemon. Of course, you've already been talking around it throughout this
Sure.
entire discussion, but so let's say you walked into your boardroom and had a new face around the table, and
Yeah.
they asked you the question, what is this white space team responsible for? How would you
Sure.
answer that question?
Sure. So Whitespace as a whole is responsible for, is really the R&D group, not innovation. I use the word R&D intentionally because everyone in Lululemon is responsible for innovation. And Whitespace runs a 3 horizon R&D model. And again, those horizons are divided based on the level of uncertainty on a technical side or a market side that we explore. So Horizon 1 for us is about co-creating with our mainline partners to continue to optimize and add newness in the businesses we're in today. Horizon 2, what we call our concept teams within Whitespace, are responsible for category recreation. And Horizon 3, the explorations group, which I lead, is responsible for the idea of finding fundamentally new businesses that Lululemon may get into in the future. And that, you know, and collectively as Whitespace, and we work with our executive team and cross-functional partners, is to design and constantly iterate on different from-tos for an organization. So if the world knows Lululemon today predominantly as a very, you know, effective and successful retailer of clothing that also has this really interesting formula for creating community, what could we be known for 10 years from now? You know, what is that too? If you were to look up on Wikipedia, which I actually think is a fantastic barometer for how the world views your company, what will the Wikipedia page say in 2030? And those are things that we sort of obsess over and then try to make that future state true.
Great. Christian, anything to add to that?
Well, I think that's great. Yeah, I really like the Horizons idea, and you know what's really interesting about that is it just shows how nimble you guys can be, because you guys can, you know, have a, you know, strategic session, and you can you know, you can move your horizons,
right,
change your focus.
Right.
So, and that's just, it's a really great construct. So I really like that. And I think you know, the thing about innovation is it's hard work. It's yeah, it's hard work. It's always misunderstood inside an organization in the present and in foresight, and it's obvious in hindsight. But the you know, it takes a lot of wisdom in organizations to both to really create an environment and a mandate for that allows innovation to flourish, and then has the perseverance to allow that to continue, understanding that, you know, the innovation is always discovered in hindsight, not in foresight, right? And you know, that's a hard thing to do. What we help organizations do with crowdsourcing is bring, you know, bring innovation, you know, in an open innovation way to an organization, so it can be more readily sourced and identified, and can create more of a buy-in and conviction for organizations on a direction to go, for example.
Yeah, great insight. So, Jordan, just with one of your earlier shares, you mentioned, and I love it, it's almost could be a great quote, that everybody on the team is responsible for innovation. And I love that. That was a really, really great comment. So there are certain certain parts, or I don't want to use the word departments, so let's use the word teams, that are more heavily leaning into innovation. So how do you collaborate as larger teams if you have to come together? And do you find that stifles innovation? Do you find, like, how do you find that? Or is it the culture itself that really promotes that fluidity and really allows you to really be able to express yourself as individual or teams and then come together?
Yeah, good question, Cal. And again, I just want to nuance the word. So, you know, I would say everyone in the company can innovate. Where I try to delineate between, there are, you know, we in Whitespace are afforded this really tremendous opportunity by Lululemon, based on the jobs that they want us to do, to have a bit more space and time than maybe some of the other groups to do research and development. You know, so we, especially my group, like, we spend a lot more time trying to backcast and put ourselves in that future state. And as Christian mentioned, then work sort of retroactively back to today. And I would say that, you know, when it comes time to collaborate and get involved cross-functionally, where you have teams or functions across Lululemon working, where Whitespace is a part of that, but not solely driving the project, when it works is really an adherence back to our process. This is in terms of how the company does strategic planning, of how, and our, when our Calvin, our CEO, when he came in, one of the first things he did was set out a clear, with the leadership team, they went away and said, let's get really clear on our goals, up to 2023 and what we're going to be for the world. And then every year we have an associated process or strategic planning cycle that many companies go through, whereby we're constantly doing a checks and balance against our progress to those goals. And what that forces the company to do, pretty much, is say, okay, in the areas where we need to fast forward, in the areas where, there's a new opportunity as we all go dynamically through our lives, they will set up an initiative, a higher priority strategic initiative. And there's a handful of those across the company. And then what that forces is to say, forget the departments, whether you're from white space or retail or digital. The question is like, who is the right team to deliver on the initiative for Lululemon? And that's when cross-functional collaboration, doing innovation or R&D, seems to work the best.
Again, very powerful strategy. Yeah. So a large part of any organization that's moving forward tenaciously is making sure that everybody on the team feels supported, right? And one of the greatest ways to support anybody on a team is to really support their learning and their growth, which is really powerful. And with growth and learning, I have it that, there's a natural byproduct of continual alignment. And so now speaking to that, what kind of tools or support, Jordan, do you find that your organization has available to really build on that?
I mean, I would say that's one of, and Christian alluded to, earlier days where, when Chip was still running the company or just the foundations of the company was built, this idea of vision, goals, and helping employees find their purpose is one of the things, certainly one of the things that I found very unique to Lululemon, based on other organizations I've been a part of. In that, whether it's your first week when you're onboarding into the company or things, it's amazing how much resource, effort, and time the organization puts on you as an individual to mark sort of your purpose, to have the tools to go through a visioning process for your life, not just Lululemon. In fact, they also encourage you to think that most people won't be at Lululemon for, 10, 12, 15 years. So they want you to think about how your time at Lululemon can be a springboard for your next thing. And there's a tremendous amount of curriculum resource around your personal vision and goals, how it's applied to your work, how you do that to become a better leader of self, leader of others within your teams if you're managing people or projects. And that I would say is, I probably should have alluded to that earlier, is another piece of the secret sauce of the Lululemon culture. So much in that, there's often talks on like, how is that something we could bring to the world more broadly? Because I do think Lululemon is quite good at that.
So Christian, what's your secret sauce? Same question to you. So what is it that you have in place at HeroX?
Well, like I said, it starts with the core values. That I think there's really three kind of fundamental elements to the success of a team. I'm trying to not use the word culture because but like if you have a team that's collaborating, performing, there's three elements that are kind of essential. There's like the hard structure, which is like the management system, the meetings, how they run the company, the tools that you use for reporting, metrics, all that business stuff, right? Then there's the like the core values, and then how the normative behavior, meaning what's normal behavior, is in the company, and then there's the third piece is a culture of performance, right? Which needs to stand out, because at the end of the day, it's you need to create a high performance organization to succeed in today's world, right? So there needs to be a real commitment to performance. And the the way I describe that is it's the interface between your team and the world, right? How that happens on your front stage, if you will, that becomes really important. And that commitment to performance is kind of non-optional. It's kind of like every company needs to have that, which, you know, is that third piece. So I look at all three of those through a lens of, you know, how are we doing in each of these, and then, you know, apply a set of tools on how to do something in one direction or another.
Got it. So gentlemen, we're gonna move into our final question. And then from there, we'll leave the floor open for some final comments, and then we'll tie things up. So Christian, what advice would you give to any organization who's just starting out on their innovation journey?
Well, if you're just starting out, you're in trouble already.
So, good answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, maybe find another job. I don't know. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No. Listen. I saw Beth Comstock, who used to be the COO for General Electric for GE, and she's since left, and she's written a book which I haven't read yet, but it's on my shelf. And she's done speaking, but she was at an event while she was still at GE, and she did a really great job of talking about the new normals in today, right? And she called it like get used to being in the in-between of things. And I think that's a really good insight beyond just mother and apple pie answers I could give you, which is we live in a world now that's, you know, we've created the second greatest invention of humankind called the internet, which connects us all in millisecond communication time. And it brings network effects and network dynamics to so many things, to the way we think, the way ideas spread, the way conspiracy theories spread, I might add, and all that other stuff. And it means that things just are moving really fast, and they're really noisy. So you don't even, like, not only are they moving fast, but sometimes you can't even tell, is this a blip, or is it moving, or am I not moving, or am I up, or am I down? And organizations are feeling the rate of market innovation. And by the way, it's called the rate of market innovation if you like what's happening. Otherwise, it's called the rate of market disruption if you don't like what's happening, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
One person's innovation is another person's disruption. Right?
Sure.
Throw in a bunch of other terms there as well.
Yeah.
So you have to get good at living in the in-between. That feeling of like, I'm not quite there and I'm not quite here because things are changing, because I don't know that there's enough time to ever kind of get settled.
Yeah, got that. So Jordan, same question to you. And maybe not organizations, maybe it should have been better phrased, starting their innovation journey, but really starting to, sometimes innovation is existing, but they haven't really wrapped, they haven't called it that. So sometimes it's existing, but they haven't called it that. So, same question to you.
Okay. I mean, I liked Christian. I thought yours was a great answer. So, I mean, I can't say what he said. So, but building on that, I'll add a few very succinct things. One is learn to fall very much in love with ambiguity. That speaks to Christian's point around just a rapidly changing environment. Spend twice as much time obsessing the problem than obsessing your solution. And then with both the problem and solution, try to learn and practice, actively and deliberately practice, to think about it and frame it in terms of systems and groups rather than an individual solve or part. Because I envision, from what I'm seeing in the world, those system level interventions becoming the most powerful forms of innovation. So that would be my advice.
Got that. So ditto and. So that's ditto. I like it. Yeah. Ditto and. So opening the floor up to just some final comments. So is there any part of when you think of innovation and culture, just through our conversation and dialogue today, that we didn't touch on that you think would be powerful to share? Christian, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah. No, I really liked your answer, Jordan. That was unexpected for a guy wearing a toque. I'm just saying.
Thanks.
Just saying. That was really good.
That long to comment on the toque.
Yeah, it's okay. Hey,
I was holding back.
It's a Northwest culture. It fits.
It's really I'm right there with you. I was wearing a toque. I'm just saying. But
we're not cool enough.
Anyways, I think I think that's really great. It's we live in a knowledge economy, so and there's just we're drowning in data, right? And understanding the difference between knowledge or data and information and knowledge is really important. Just kind of springboarding off of what you said, Jordan. The systems thinking is really great because systems stick, right? Like the things that persevere are systems, even if you don't see them as systems. What's happening in politics, what's happening in the economy, it's a system with a feedback loop or other elements. And if you don't understand the system, either that you're creating or that you're in, you're gonna struggle. You're gonna have a superstitious relationship with your project, if you will, right? I think that's a really important element of it that's really not understood, not spoken about. It's not blog friendly to talk in these terms, but it's the kind of stuff that makes things happen. So
yeah.
That's great.
I agree. And then Cal, to my answer, I would speak to some of the themes we've talked about today around speed, around innovation, around recognizing your role in a rapidly changing system. And I would just make more of a direct plug to, my view and Whitespace and Lululemon's view to the importance of constantly reinventing your approach and tactics. And that's why I think, networks, open innovation, crowd solutions like HeroX is something that is really, really important. And for us as an organization, something that we, now know we have to become an active participant in, partially because just that the rate of change and the system is, even in an organization where I think we've done a very nice job being as flexible and nimble to changing demands. We're still a big company compared to many, and more, I think over the next 10 years, it's like having a very healthy relationship with the startup community, with disruptors, who are looking at making positive, but impactful changes to our industry, to the role we'll play in the system. The more that we can garner a sort of extended network of minds and solution-oriented resources, that I think it'll only strengthen our approach and protect our position as a company. And so, it was great to be on the podcast today, but more importantly, I'm excited to continue to explore the power of tools and systems that, companies like HeroX are building for the world.
Great final thought. Absolutely love that. So, so my final thought, I have it that culture is not something that we talk about. It's something that you feel when you're in the presence of a team. And I've had obviously the pleasure of being around our HeroX family, and it's a family first. And I've also had the pleasure of being in Jordan's offices and being amongst his team. And, it's when you show up as team members in service of one another's greatness, that's where magic happens. And when it's present in the way, again, when you step back and you look at the way a team is and you see it, real time on the court, that's when you actually see magic happen. And I've seen that magic in both these teams. So it's, you know, it's powerful. And I would imagine that going forward, if organizations haven't already, they're going to start to lean more towards similar practices to really have a similar environment fostered.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jordan, we really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule today to participate in this discussion and offering your incredible insights.
Thanks for having me.
For our audience, if you'd like to schedule a free workshop to discover how crowdsourcing can support your innovation strategies, reach out to us directly. And listen, and with that, on behalf of Jordan, Christian, and I, thank you so very much for taking the time to join us today. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.